I'll open it up to questions.
Okay. So I have to ask a question. I really loved you. I mean, I loved the way you showed the whole thing where you go in, you enter your controls, and you see what turns green and what turns red. But you also mentioned earlier on that you're not striving for a perfect scenario. Why is that? Why do you not want to shoot for perfection?
Yeah, I mean, you should shoot for perfection, but know that it's unachievable. And what I didn't show, and I'm a huge MITRE nerd, I could talk about this for a long time, but within the techniques are sub-techniques, and within those sub-techniques are procedures. And so there's just like infinite number of possibilities. So even if you do have coverage of a technique, you might not have coverage of every procedure they're in. And so it's really going to be impossible to get 100% coverage. Shoot for it, but make sure that the route you take is getting the most return on those earlier ones you take.
Well, and I thought you were going to say something a little bit different, which is if you focus so hard on doing everything exactly the way MITRE tells you, you might miss the forest for the trees and not pick up on something that maybe doesn't show up necessarily within MITRE, but is really important and worthy of your time.
That's so true.
And I guess, I guess the other question is around zero-day attacks. What would you recommend around those?
Yeah, that is where, and people kind of get confused, right? Like if every 0 day, does that mean there's going to be a new technique in the framework? And that's not necessarily true. A 0 day can leverage existing techniques. It just means there's like a novel piece of malware or something in there, a novel exploitation, but that exploitation might fit within one of the techniques.
Something that already existed. Okay.
Further, so you can prevent these by preventing that technique or tactic in a more general sense than a really specific prevention vector. So that's the other thing. And then the other one is zero trust, where you're actually not as much focused on the techniques here. You're focused on what you need to do, disallowing everything else. Then you're going to start to prevent all kinds of 0 days.
Excellent.
Great presentation. Would love to know your take on the MITRE Defend framework that's still in beta and how that's going to change the landscape for threat protection.
Yeah, I think it's really great. I think the way I use the attack navigator was my way of doing defend before defend. And I think that once they fully roll it out, it's going to be really strong. I wanted to wait for that to get fully baked. I got friends over at MITRE. Frank Duff's a good friend of mine. I love those folks, and they're doing great work. I just think that it's not in the navigator yet. And the navigator is such an awesome tool that you should just use that now. Once it's in the navigator, it'll be even better.
And I have to raise something because I'm not a MITRE nerd, but I really support what they're doing. How would you respond to somebody who says, well, MITRE's nice, but we do NIST?
Yeah, NIST is great too. MITRE is, I think, dedicated to building a database, building a common language, and so they're not mutually exclusive. NIST is a bit more prescriptive, and you should absolutely adhere to NIST frameworks that align with your vision. Their zero trust one is especially great. MITRE doesn't have that, and so they're not mutually exclusive is how I would articulate that.
Great answer. I could not, that was exactly what I was hoping you would say. Dan, thank you so much. Thanks to Dan and for a great presentation.